Just to set the stage, Ryan and Rowan are fleeing across the planet to get to his ship. And through a set of unfortunate circumstances, they've lost their ride and are forced onto public transit. And this is them getting onto the intercontinental magnetic levitation train. Ryan settled into his seat beside Rowan on the maglev to the Duchovny Tower. They'd been forced to wait for over an hour in the terminal. Being on the move again was a relief. How long will this take? Rowan fidgeted uncomfortably. 40 minutes, give or take. Relax. Maglevs are statistically the safest mode of on-planet travel. And if something goes wrong? Don't live long enough to worry about it. Ryan patted her hand and smiled. The train pulled out and started to accelerate. Are there magazines or anything? Rowan fidgeted. Ryan looked at her sadly and nodded. You'd come across it sooner or later. Each seat is equipped with an e-rig. They only do PG non-specific viewpoint programming on the trains. It would be a good idea for you to use it. It covers your face, which means that you're less likely to be recognized. Fine, anything, so long as it takes my mind off how fast I'm going. The nanobots they use to construct your memories are the same type that the inputs use. You should be good to go. Lean back and press the green button on your armrest. The service is included in the boarding costs. The computer will pull you out 5 minutes before we reach our destination. Rowan did as instructed and watched as the e-helmet descended out of the top of her seat. She found herself staring into a selection screen listing various shows. Detective Dave. They have got to be kidding. She read down the list. Angel Black, Gamble and Lose. Angel and Torrent reconcile after her tryst with Farley, while Farley tries to win back Rowan's affections. Meanwhile, the Chameleozoid pirate Hurst and Vassalou plot to access the escape pod and summon the pirate's battlecruiser into Earth orbit. Warning, adult themes and violence. Been there, done that. Once was enough. This is sick. She settled on a tourist piece that was a tour of the studio museum and triggered activate. Questions came up asking her gender, age, and sexual orientation. She was tempted to lie, but really didn't want to find out what that might result in. Rowan found herself standing at the doors to a large one-story building fashioned out of rock. The roof was covered with black panels. She entered, stepped up to an automated ticket booth, and swiped an ident card before moving forward. She could feel the brush of her clothing against her skin, smell the mild hint of lavender that was in the air. Every sense was alive, but she had no free will. She couldn't control her actions. The first wave of emotion hit her as she looked at a hologram. The image looked like her father, perhaps age 30. She felt lust for the man. She tried to feel ashamed, but couldn't. She was filled with the emotion of some other woman who'd once done this to her. Hi, I'm the image of an ASH-M series clone. I'll be your guide as we explore the fascinating history of e-entertainments. The image looked at her with smoldering eyes, and the tour commenced. John's vidphone beeped. He rolled over where he'd fallen in a puddle of his own vomit. It bleeped again, then the record function triggered. Helen's face appeared on the screen. Mr. Wilson, if you're there, please pick up. We need to speak with you about possible security issues with your staff. Anything that you could tell us would be a help. Mrs. Tallman thinks that the ATV that crashed into Lake Doig is a vehicle that was used to transport Rowan. She needs to figure out who the thief was. Please call the studio as soon as you get this. The screen went blank. John rolled his obese form over and belched. Mildred stared at the tire tracks. Even in the evening light, it was obvious that one set came from inside the prison and another went back the same way. No footprints came from the hiking trail, but two sets went towards it. It was a diversion. I've got to learn to stop underestimating this Johnny. I've reinstituted the travel watch. Any idea who the thief is? Mildred held her handheld focused on a print in a patch of moist dirt. He wears a size 10 shoe. Handheld, connect me with Helen in studio security. Mrs. Tallman, I haven't been able to get through to Mr. Wilson. I did reach Ryan. He's getting really annoyed about us harassing him. Mildred smiled and ran into her vehicle. Muriel, where do the records place Ryan Chandler's location? Ryan Chandler is currently on the express maglev from Ball Tower to Duchovny Tower. He's listed twice. We have him. Chow stepped into the vehicle. It's indicative, but not enough to revoke his travel privileges. There's no law against having a sophisticated answering machine. Unless... Muriel, put in a call to Justice Fred Edwards at the Duchovny Tower. Bleep me when you get through to the man himself. Mildred returned her attention to Chow. I've met him at some studio parties. He might be willing to issue a freeze on Chandler's travel privileges. Oh, now what? Chow looked out the door towards the setting sun. Now we hope that someone catches the property in a travel station while we go check out that ATV. Our Johnny Ryan was living in it for the divine knows how long. There's bound to be DNA left if the ATV didn't disintegrate in the crash. Ma'am, those troop carriers wouldn't disintegrate in the sun. They may break down, but they are tough puppies. We'll find it. Good. We'll have to set a watch at the Duchovny Maglev station. I want anyone that looks remotely like the property checked. Double-check that the property's particulars have been logged in at the spaceport. He's going to have to take her off planet. When he tries, we'll get him. Unless... Mildred started for the driver's compartment. What are you thinking? Chow fell into step beside her. I'm thinking I'm going to check a hobbyist website, then call a man about some scrap. Can you arrange for a military airlift to pick us up? Yes. Call it in. We may be in worse trouble than I thought. The emotional surrogates provide a template that is translated into an input matrix and sent to the e-rigs. Rowan listened as her father's image lectured as she watched this display demonstrating an emotional transfer. Excuse me, where did the genetic material for the emotional surrogates come from? Rowan felt her lips move, her throat vibrate, but it wasn't her voice that issued out. The image of her father smiled. That is a good question. This display addresses that issue. The holographic guide vanished, then reappeared beside another display. Pictures of various E-stars were up on it. Rowan noticed her own image there. Her eyes refused to fix on it, instead preferring a picture of a well-muscled black man. At least she had good taste, thought Rowan. The turf focused her attention on what the guide was saying. Way back in human history, during the era known as the 20th century CE, humans had a primitive form of entertainment. Dramas were performed and recorded, then shared with an audience through a variety of means. The hologram smiled condescendingly. They were restricted to the senses of hearing and sight, and had no emotional input. Television and movies. He's talking about television and movies like they were hieroglyphs, thought Rowan. Some examples of these early attempts at entertainment have survived to this day. Copies of these can be viewed in the archive section of this museum and purchased in the gift shop. The actors and actresses that performed in these entertainments were deified by primitive humans, who worshipped them as incarnate gods. The main temple of this strange faith was in a region known as California. Sometime in the 9th century before contact, a natural disaster struck this region. This disaster destroyed the temples and bankrupted many of the entertainers. This period in history corresponds with humankind's first major advances in biotechnology. Many performers sold their DNA to the emerging biotech firms. These firms made perpetual cell cultures and extrapolated products that allowed people to alter their appearances to approximate that of their favorite deity. Centuries later, the studios obtained the rights to these cell cultures. These cell cultures, coupled with samples revived and added from archaeological digs, have provided the DNA templates to create the emotional surrogates. How do they create the surrogate's quasi-personality? We are sorry to cut short your entertainment. The train is approaching the Duchovny Tower station. Please prepare to disembark. Rowan blinked as the interface lifted off her head. What did you think? Ryan reached over and took her hand. It's horrid. TV was bad enough. And they talk about clones like we're pieces of meat. Property, Keep your voice down. Ryan's face looked panicked. An elderly couple in the next seat over stared at Rowan with distaste. I don't know why they let fakies ride with decent people, said the woman who was resplendent in her fur coat. Maybe because it was the lives of our first bodies that bought humanity's worlds from the day we joined the Republic, snapped Ryan. Well, while the woman looked away, the man leaned into the aisle and whispered, Terra Nostra Sauce. Salgenis Alba Plantea. Ryan whispered back. The man nodded gravely and shot Ryan a thumbs up. Rowan shook her head. Ryan turned his attention back to her. So you didn't like E-Entertainments? Rowan spoke softly. I don't like not having control. It was creepy not being able to decide anything. I hated it. Ryan took a deep breath and beamed. You can't imagine how glad I am to hear that.
Thank you. Good reading. And JD Deluzio in the chat also says clap, clap.
Oh, thanks, JD.